Hi, Modern World History students. At this point, you have read and learned a little bit about the main causes of World War I and how they contributed to the outbreak of a global conflict. So this little review lecture will serve to go over each of those main causes as you will be completing an assignment to evaluate which one you think played the largest role in the outbreak of war. So our first main cause is the M in our acronym MAIN. It's this idea of militarism. And militarism involves a couple of different things. First, it's about glorifying military strength as the best way to resolve conflict, basically having a pretty positive view of war. And then it's also about keeping your army mobilized and prepared for war, so making sure you have enough men to fight, making sure you have enough weapons, equipment, and also plans for if you would go to war against a neighboring country. One of the things about militarism in this time period in the late 1800s, early 1900s is that war was seen as sort of this glorious endeavor. It was how young men made a name for themselves or became men, so to speak. Here you see a picture, this is from Great Britain, but of men kind of lining up outside of a recruiting office before World War I. And you can see by the expressions on their faces, they are happy to do this. In some ways they look excited, proud. Again, they're serving their country. And although we would still value those things today, we probably have a more kind of negative view of warfare. We know kind of the devastating effects it can have on individuals and the PTSD that soldiers can experience. But, you know, at this point in European history, people don't have that belief. War is something glorious. It's something to be celebrated. It's sort of a rite of passage, so to speak. We also see, and you looked at in your reading, the information that shows us just how much money European nations and the US and Japan were spending on their militaries, which shows us that they really value this aspect of their economy and their government and their political life. And so you should have noticed here that across the board, every single country over this 5-year period increased their spending on their military. Germany, you see, increases the most from 286.7 million to 463.6 million. So almost kind of doubling their expenditures on their military. And then you would have also noticed that Russia also jumps into kind of spending about 435 million on their military by 1930. So they also see a really large jump. And what's interesting about this is that Germany and France, if you look at a map, they're right next to each other. And so it's sort of this idea with militarism that if your neighboring country is building up their army and their navy, you have to do the same thing. You have to spend that kind of money too, because it's very likely you could end up going to war. All of this expenditure on the military, and a good example of this is in 1906, the British launched this new type of battleship, a very modern battleship called the Dreadnought. And this basically changes naval warfare. And immediately we sort of see the development of an arms race. Britain starts producing more of these types of ships, and then Germany and other countries start doing the same thing. And so that really is in the background here of World War I. Every country is spending more money, building new and more modern equipment and weaponry, and also just this overall kind of sense that war is this good thing for a society. It's how you prove that you're a powerful nation and a strong nation. The next main cause is alliances. That's the A in our acronym. And an alliance is an agreement between two countries or two nations for assistance and protection. So it's basically like, you know, I'll have your back if you have my back. And so in the 1800s, in kind of the 50 years leading up to World War I, we see European countries creating a lot of different alliances. Many of them were conducted in secret, and many of them kind of changed over the course of time. But it was all to, originally to try to keep peace, right? Because if there's these different alliances, you're going to be less likely to go to war because you don't want to have to fight 3 or 4 countries rather than just one. But it also kind of encourages the development of kind of 2 rival camps in Europe that will compete against each other. And as soon as one country goes to war, it means almost everybody has to join in. And so here we see an image that shows us sort of the different types of alliances that were being created throughout the 1800s. You'll see that some of them changed, some of them started at different years and different connections, but ultimately what we see is that there are kind of 2 rival groups, okay, the Triple Entente and the Triple Alliance, and they all have kind of connections in this Balkan region. And so you looked at this political cartoon, and it just kind of goes to show the way in which alliances helped spur the conflict, because you can see here that as soon as one country joins, somebody comes, or as soon as this person attacks the front guy, this one has to come protect his neighbor, right? And one of the things you would have looked at in your map of alliances is that Russia was this really big European country, a great power, and they technically are called the Slavic people. And so they're going to be very interested in Serbia, and this is going to be an area that causes contention later on. And so by 1914, as I said, the major powers of Europe had found themselves divided into 2 different security alliances. Again, the Triple Entente of France, Great Britain, and Russia, and the Triple Alliance of Austria-Hungary, Germany, and Italy. And if you know World War I history, you know that the Triple Entente will become the Allied powers, the group that the US will eventually join, and the other group was called the Central Powers, and you can kind of understand that name based on where they're located here on the map. But at this time, their official alliance names are the Triple Entente and the Triple Alliance. That brings us to the I in our acronym, imperialism, and this is really when European powers are, all throughout the 1800s we learned, trying to create these really large overseas empires by developing colonies, particularly in Africa and Asia. And they're doing this to kind of strengthen their influence and their economic power. And so we looked at a number of maps when we studied imperialism. And so you can see here many European countries have claimed territory in Africa, okay, and in Asia. And what starts to happen is these European countries begin competing with each other for territories in Africa and Asia. And there are quite a few examples where European countries almost went to war in places in Africa and Asia because of the tension that was emerging here. For example, there was a crisis in Morocco. There was some crises in Egypt where, like, Great Britain and France almost went to war with each other in trying to develop their imperial empires. And so this is an area where we're seeing the competition play out between these European countries. And our last main cause, the N in our acronym, is nationalism. And we've looked at this in a couple of different ways. One, it's kind of about trying to create new nation states and unite people under governments controlled by their own people. And it's also, as it develops towards World War I, we also see it's about putting kind of the interests of your own country above the interests of other countries. And so we see here 2 kind of posters or pieces of propaganda that highlight the nationalism of this time. This is a German poster saying the world is mine, The German figure is really big. The sun is there. Clearly evidence of, Germany expressing their nationalism, the idea here of fighting for Great Britain. So there are these feelings of kind of pride in one's country, as well as kind of this idea that you're going to put your own country's interests above that of other countries. And so this brings me to a thought about Germany in particular. One of the things that we don't really cover in great detail in modern world history is how Germany comes to be a country. And in fact, Germany is not the country that we know it is today until 1871. They're actually a new nation state. Nationalism led a lot of those territories in what used to be the Holy Roman Empire to come together and create their own new nation state. And the guy who was responsible for this was Otto von Bismarck. And he was this military leader who sort of unified the German people by a phrase he called blood and iron. So they fought a number of wars to kind of unify Germany. And Otto von Bismarck worked really hard to strengthen the German military. He had railroads built. They industrialized. And this is because as a new country, they really need to catch up to the rest of Europe. So they need to catch up to France and to Great Britain and to Russia. And so they're sort of in this position where they want to create an empire. And so Bismarck is somebody who throughout the 1800s is building up the military. He is creating alliances to protect Germany's position in the middle of Europe, and is also kind of helping, the German people create their own unique identity through nationalism. And we're going to see that Germany wants to kind of punish its number one enemy, which is France. And so that's a little bit about kind of why Germany plays such an important role here in World War I, because it is this new country that's trying to establish itself and make a name for itself. And so that brings us to sort of the spark that sets off World War I. And this happens in a region known as the Balkans. The Balkans has this unique nickname. It's called the powder keg. It's this idea that this region is about to blow up. And it's this mountainous region here in southeastern Europe. And as you can see from this image in the top here, it's a really diverse region. There are Serbian people, Bulgarian people, Romanian people, Albanians, Greeks. And we start seeing the rise of nationalism. Many of these people want to be their own independent countries. And that starts to happen. They start breaking away from the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire also has a nickname, the sick man of Europe, and that's because the Ottoman Empire is slowly shrinking throughout the 1800s as these different groups gain independence and become their own unique countries. Well, as they become their own unique countries, we're going to see that these Balkan countries start having disagreements with each other. And so it's not a very politically stable place. And Otto von Bismarck himself kind of predicted that this region would become a problem. He said, Europe today is a powder keg, and the leaders are like men smoking in an arsenal. A single spark will set off an explosion that will consume us all. I cannot tell you when that explosion will occur, but I can tell you where. Some damned foolish thing in the Balkans will set it off. And so here Bismarck is almost predicting that the start of a major war is going to begin in this region. And so that brings us to the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. So Serbia is a country, a newly formed country in the Balkan region that wants all kind of Serbian and Slavic peoples to be united under one country. But the problem is there's a lot of kind of Slavic and Serbian people living in Austria-Hungary. And so they want to kind of create problems and force Austria-Hungary to kind of give up these people. And so on June 28, 1914, Franz Ferdinand and his wife are traveling through Bosnia and Herzegovina to the capital of Sarajevo for a diplomatic trip. And this young man, Gavrilo Princip of the Black Hand, a terrorist group, decides to assassinate the Archduke. And immediately, Austria-Hungary blames Serbia for the assassination and declares war. And as soon as Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia, they give Serbia kind of this ultimatum with a bunch of things that Serbia could do to avoid war, but Serbia doesn't agree to this ultimatum. And so Austria-Hungary will ultimately begin bombing Serbia. And at that moment, the alliance system kicks in, because here's little Serbia, okay, is blamed for the war. Austria-Hungary is blaming them for the assassination. Russia sees that Austria-Hungary is bombing Serbia. So Russia says, oh, no, you don't. You're not harming my friend. So Russia kind of begins to mobilize their army and joins. Well, Germany has an alliance with Austria-Hungary, sees that Russia is mobilizing and says, you're not allowed to get involved in this without us coming into play. And as soon as Germany kind of joins, we see France, who's a neighbor of Germany, come to the aid of Russia, who's they're allied with. And then Great Britain will ultimately join as well. And so all of a sudden we have the start of World War I. So I'm going to show you a quick video clip here that highlights this mobilization.
The great powers of Europe are divided into two rival alliances, the Triple Entente, France, Britain, and Russia, united by fear and suspicion of Germany, Europe's new strongest power. And the Triple Alliance, Germany, which fears encirclement by its rivals, Austro-Hungary, clinging on to a fragile empire, and Italy, seeking gains at French expense. The spark comes on the 28th of June in the city of Sarajevo. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, is assassinated by a 19-year-old Slav nationalist named Gavrilo Princip. Austro-Hungary accuses its Balkan rival Serbia of having aided the assassin and sends an ultimatum demanding humiliating concessions. Serbia rejects the ultimatum, and Austro-Hungary declares war. Within hours, Austrian forces are shelling Belgrade. The Russian Tsar, Nicholas II, feels honor-bound to defend Serbia, a fellow Slav nation, and orders the Russian army to mobilize. German Emperor Wilhelm II has promised his support to Austro-Hungary. He and his generals see conflict with Russia as inevitable, and the sooner the better, as Russian strength grows year on year. Russian mobilization is used to justify German mobilization, followed by a declaration of war on Russia. Germany knows war with Russia means war with Russia's ally, France. It has developed the Schlieffen Plan to meet this threat of a war on two fronts. First, its armies will advance rapidly through neutral Belgium to encircle and destroy French armies near Paris and win a quick victory. Declares war on France. 6 million men are now marching to war across Europe.